Around 1 year ago, I made the crazy decision to move to Argentina in an attempt to become fluent in Spanish. And just like most people, I thought, yeah, 6 months living in a completely different country where they only speak Spanish, I'm basically guaranteed to become fluent. But what if I told you that's not at all what actually happened? So if you're thinking about moving abroad to learn a language, this is gonna be my unscripted, unfiltered, exact thoughts, the things I did and the things I would do differently. So lucky for me, I did have a bit of a head start in my Spanish journey because my mother is born and raised in Buenos Aires, meaning I grew up most of my life hearing Argentinian Spanish. Therefore, when I showed up to Argentina, I had a very, very good level of comprehension. But me being a silly child who only worried about playing Minecraft, I didn't actually put in the effort of learning Spanish. Therefore, I couldn't exactly speak. I could understand a ton. I had the very, very, very basics of, household Spanish. But when it came to actually speaking, to actually having conversations, to expressing myself, this is where I struggled, and this is what I wanted to achieve in my time in Argentina. I figured I'd show up, I'd take classes every single day, I'd go outside, I'd practice with the locals every single day, and by the end of it, easy peasy, easy. I thought it was gonna be easy. But then in my second night in Argentina, I went out with my cousins who don't speak a word of English. And this is when I realized, okay, this might actually be a lot harder than I thought it would be. I remember standing there in a group of Argentinians, all of them talking to me understanding the majority of what I was being asked. But when it came to expressing myself, when it came to trying to say what I wanted to say, I struggled, and I could tell that they were trying really, really hard to comprehend what I was trying to say, but it was a bit more of a struggle for all the parties involved. So despite me preparing for a few months doing classes, despite me doing Pimsleur lessons, when it came to actually speaking to real people, this is where I started to feel stuck. This is where I started to feel embarrassed that I couldn't say what I wanted to say, and I couldn't speak to my cousins. I couldn't speak to these people for real. And even afterwards, when we were on our way home after the night out, I was with my one cousin and I was trying to have a conversation with him, and I was doing the fake it till you make it. I was trying to be confident. I was trying to show that yes, I actually can speak Spanish, I know what I'm doing, but the level of comprehension just wasn't there. He was struggling to understand what I was trying to say, and I was getting frustrated that I couldn't express the words I wanted to say. But then something happened. Then we were walking down the street and he said, "Cruzamos acá." And this is when I could see something rewire in my brain. My brain immediately picked up that word, cruzamos. This is a word I didn't know yet. It just means to cross, right? He just said, we're gonna cross the street here. But there was something about that word that he said, cruzamos acá. First of all, boom, cruzar was now immediately wired into my head. I would remember this word forever. And despite me reading hundreds of thousands, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but despite me reading an absolute absurd amount of verbs and writing them down 100 times, they weren't coming. But this one moment where he used the word in a real situation, a word that I had not known yet, but made complete sense, cruzar, a switch in my flip. What? A switch flipped in my brain. I thought, this is exactly how I'm gonna learn. Hearing the locals use the words in real situations, in real conversations, and then I am just literally gonna repeat everything that I hear. But despite this, I did still have the goal of taking classes, of taking Spanish classes every single day, just to increase the amount that I was learning every single day. So I found a nearby Spanish school that I would walk to 5 days of the week for 2 hours, where within that classroom, it was a very conversational experience. But to be honest with you, I didn't like it. Even though I just told you that conversation was the way I was gonna learn, I was having conversations with people who weren't native Argentinians. I don't know why this was their study strategy. I was speaking Spanish to Russians, to Americans, to French people, but it's not who I want to speak Spanish to. I'm in Argentina to speak Spanish with Argentinians. Why am I speaking with people in these classes? To me, it didn't make sense. Now, of course, I did get some value out of these classes because it did teach me some of the things that you just don't learn in everyday life, like the difference between quedar and quedarse, the difference between traer and llevar. Those things are really, really hard to learn on your own because you don't necessarily know that there's a difference, that there's such a big difference in between them. It's you can't learn what you don't, what's the saying? You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So there's so many things that I just straight up didn't know, and the classes did help with that. But over time, I found that I was just not benefiting to the level I wanted to benefit, so I stopped taking those classes. Right, so in the combination with those thoughts I was having, plus also the Canadian dollar dropping pretty significantly, making my life a little bit more expensive in Argentina, I decided to change my plans. I was gonna take the Spanish learning a little bit more into my own hands. And it was at this time that I felt like I did the most amount of learning. I wasn't necessarily comfortable in Argentina yet, but because I still wanted to take lessons, I found cheaper lessons online with an Argentinian. It being online for some reason made it cheaper. It felt kind of silly doing lessons with an Argentinian online while I'm in Argentina, but it helped. And what helped was because I brought exactly what I wanted to learn to the classes instead of depending on the classes to teach me just whatever they're going to teach me that day. So it was at this time that I was taking everything into my own hands. Every morning I would go and I would do flashcards for whatever subject I wanted to learn. Afterwards, I'd go and I'd watch a YouTube video. I think it was, what's his name? The Spanish tutor. Yeah, the language tutor, Spanish. I was watching his videos, which would give me actual genuine lessons. I would take those lessons to AI. So I was either using ChatGPT, typing, I'm learning this today, give me fill in the blank sentences to help me learn this conjugation, or I would take it to Lengua. Lengua being a language-based AI where you actually speak to it, it gives you instant corrections. You can choose which accent you're learning, which was amazing given I was in Argentina, wanted to learn Argentinian Spanish. I like this one because there was no pressure, there was no embarrassment. If I said something stupid, I didn't have an Argentinian laugh at me, although the Argentinians were quite susceptible to people learning Spanish, unlike French people. And I can say that because I'm Canadian. And what really helped at the time is I was seeing a girl who didn't speak any English. Okay, I'm with my friend here, and she's too scared to be on camera. I don't think she understands what I'm saying, so that's okay. And this forced me all the time to have to speak in Spanish, to have to find that word to make sure that I'm expressing exactly what I wanted to say. And I can tell you that when I was with her, despite my brain like working on full hyperdrive the whole time, I would be very tired by the end of the day. It was in situations like this where I learned the most Spanish. So throughout the next few months, I continued to immerse myself into situations where I could only speak Spanish. My barber only speaks Spanish. I would see him every 2 weeks. You know, if I was at one of my favorite hostels, which I would revisit all the time, and to the people in the bar, I would practice speaking Spanish with them. With the people at the gym, I don't know, I was just focusing on whatever situations I can to force myself to speak Spanish. But unfortunately, after some time, I got comfortable in Argentina. I had friends who spoke English. I was seeing a different girl who also spoke English, and I became comfortable. I stopped forcing myself to have to speak every day. So yes, I was still improving, but I think I could have learned more had I forced myself to learn more. So meaning when I came home, I had confidence in my Spanish, but I had not reached the level that I wanted to. But that's not to say that my Spanish didn't get better. My Spanish got significantly better. And not only that, it was my level of confidence. My confidence might have actually been a little bit too high. Sometimes I had to go back and actually listen to myself speak, and listening to myself speak is a little bit painful because it's a lot slower than I think in my head, because my brain is running full speed when I'm speaking Spanish, but going back and listening to it, it's slower. It's slower than I want it to be. So if I had to go back and do it all again, these are the changes I would make to exactly the process that I took in Argentina. The first situation is immerse myself with people who don't speak English. Like, despite this taking a huge toll on your brain, this is exactly where you're forced to learn no matter what. This is where you're hearing the words that you're actually going to use in everyday life instead of learning random textbook words. The second thing I would do is take classes specifically focusing on perfecting all the different tenses and conjugations. The tenses and the conjugations are the most important part, because once you learn a new verb, you just take those tenses and you throw it into the new word. So instead of having to learn the conjugations of this new word in this situation and this new word in this situation, no, you've learned all the conjugations. You've taken all the classes, you've perfected, you've repeated all those conjugations, pluscuamperfecto and subjuntivo imperfecto, you know, all these crazy things that, you know, it's hard and it just takes straight repetition. But once you can take that repetition and implement it into new words that you're picking up every single day, that's how you're going to be able to express yourself significantly better. And then also literally just speaking more Spanish in whatever situation, thinking in my brain in Spanish, asking people around me if I'm missing a word, hey, how do you say this word? ¿Cómo dirías esta palabra? If I hear a slang word that I don't understand, ¿qué significa bondi? Now, since I've been practicing every single day, speaking for at least 1 hour, listening to Spanish podcasts to train my ear to all the new words, I feel confident to the point where I've even done a full podcast in Spanish, which to me is like mind-boggling. And that was my experience moving abroad, learning Spanish, the things I liked, the things I should have done better. And if you want to learn how my Spanish is still improving every single day, even from home, click on this video. It talks a little bit more about how to use this AI that I've been talking about, because using this AI has given me significantly more confidence when it comes to actually having real conversations with people instead of just spitting out the same sentences that you learn on Duolingo. Thanks for watching, guys. Nice heartfelt story here, and I'll see you in the next video.